Welcome back. Today, we're digging into something huge, a reported new global strategy. And when I say new, I mean a plan that could completely redraw the map of international power as we know it. So, how do you even begin to plan something like this? Well, it all starts with the biggest, most ambitious piece of the whole puzzle, a brand new international council. And this thing, it's designed to completely upend how global power works. Right, so first up, Trump's new World Council. A substitute for the United Nations, you ask? Well, let's see. It all kicked off at the Davos conference. President Trump gets up and announces the creation of this World Peace Council. On the surface, it was all about solving the conflict in Gaza. But, as we quickly found out, its real scope was, let's just say, a lot bigger. Okay, so what exactly is this World Peace Council? It's a new international body, and here's the kicker. It was actually approved by the UN Security Council. It was supposed to be all about solving global conflicts with the US president in the lead. But that's where things get really interesting. See, it started with this official UN blessing for a very specific, limited mission. But the second that ink was dry, the real plan came out. This wasn't just about one conflict. The goal was to create a body that would, for all intents and purposes, govern the entire world. So how does this thing actually work? Let's look at the power structure. On one side, you've got a majority vote. The council gets together, they vote on resolutions. Seems normal, right? But then you look at the other side. If the US president disagrees with that majority, his decision overrules it. Period. A total veto. And on top of that, he has the sole authority to add or kick out member states whenever he wants. You can probably imagine how a structure like that went over. It caused a massive international controversy, like immediately. Which brings us to our next point, Europe's rebellion and, well, Russia's deal. The world was completely divided over this new council. I mean, the announcement just blew everything up. It created some really unexpected alliances and, maybe more importantly, showed just how deep the cracks were getting between the US and its old friends in Europe. So invitations went out to 60 nations. Come join my new council, right? But the response? Kind of chilly, to be honest. As you can see, out of those 60, only 22 actually joined up at first. A whole 38 either flat out refused or said they needed to study it. And leading the no-thanks crowd was a big chunk of Europe. So why did Europe say no? Well, everyone had their reasons. The UK was like, you want us to sit down with Russia while we're funding the war against them in Ukraine? No way. Spain was more philosophical, basically saying the UN is the only legitimate peacemaker. The EU tried to find a middle ground. Okay, we'll join, but only if the council's job is limited to Gaza. And then there's Canada. Their invitation actually got taken back after a public fight over some US missile plans. And this quote from the Italian Prime Minister, man, it just nails it. Our Constitution prevents us from joining any organization where our powers are not equal to other states. This really gets to the core of the problem, you know? It wasn't just about politics. For a lot of these democracies, their own laws, their constitutions, literally make it illegal to join a club where one member gets to be the boss of everyone else. Okay, but while Europe was putting up a wall, someone else saw a golden opportunity. Let's talk about Russia's deal versus the European stance. There was a $1 billion membership fee. Europe, of course, refused, objecting to the whole idea. But Russia? They said, sure, we'll join. We'll even pay the $1 billion fee for a permanent spot. But, and this is a brilliant move, they had one condition. That payment, it had to come from the $367 billion of their own assets that the US and EU had frozen. In other words, they wanted to pay their entry fee with their own frozen money. Meanwhile, Europe's refusal was met with threats of new trade tariffs from the US. So, despite all that controversy, the council was up and running, which leads us to its first big task, Kushner's plan for Gaza. This was meant to be the council's first major initiative, a really detailed plan to finally end the war, with Jared Kushner leading the charge. And it was a really comprehensive plan. Let's walk through the steps. First, a 100% Palestinian National Committee would govern Gaza. Step 2, Hamas's entire military infrastructure gets dismantled. Then, and only then, the Israeli army would gradually pull back to a secure buffer zone. After that, reconstruction could begin, starting in the areas that were already disarmed. And what about the Hamas fighters? They were offered a choice, amnesty, exile, or, for some, a chance to join a new police force. But that last one needed a big thumbs up from both the US and Israel. Okay, so the council is dealing with Gaza. But behind all the headlines about peace deals, something else was going on.
Something much, much bigger. A massive strategic play was unfolding quietly in the background, securing parts of Greenland for a seriously futuristic defense project.
Greenland and the Golden Dome. Sounds like a movie title, right? But this is the strategic prize behind all the politics. You might be asking yourself, why Greenland? What's the big deal with this giant island of ice? Well, it turns out Greenland is a strategic treasure. It's not just snow, it's the key to unbelievable economic and military power in the century. I mean, think about it. Greenland has 43 of the 50 rarest earth minerals on the planet. You know, the stuff you need for all our modern tech. Its location? Perfect for keeping an eye on Russian subs in the Arctic. It also blocks China from getting a military or economic foothold up there. And the real kicker, it's the absolute ideal spot to build a new kind of missile defense shield. Controlling Greenland isn't just a win, it's a geopolitical grand slam. And that brings us to the Golden Dome. This is where things start to sound like science fiction. It's a proposed space-based missile defense shield built with SpaceX that's designed to create a protective layer of armed satellites all around the Earth. Basically, a giant shield in space to stop ballistic missiles. So how big are we talking? 1,000. 1,000 armed satellites. And we're not talking about your standard GPS satellites here. These things would be armed with lasers and interceptor missiles, ready to take out threats from orbit. Okay, and the price tag for this sci-fi dream? $300 billion. Let that sink in for a second. $300 billion. That's easily one of the most expensive, most ambitious military projects ever. And it's not just the money. Even if you had all $300 billion tomorrow, experts say it would still take up to 17 years to get this thing fully built and operational. 17 years. And that's assuming everything goes perfectly and all this brand new tech actually, works. So let's tie all of this together. You've got this new council, you got the deals with Russia, the standoff with Europe, and then this crazy ambitious Golden Dome project. When you put all those pieces on the board, a picture starts to form, right? A picture of a potential new global order. And the Greenland deal is the perfect example of how this strategy works. There was no invasion, no formal annexation. Instead, it was all about leverage. By threatening Europe with tariffs on one hand and dangling the necessity of the Golden Dome on the other, Trump secured control over key areas of Greenland. Just like that, the U.S. got the territory it needed for bases and to get at those rare minerals, all without firing a shot. Which really leaves us with one big provocative question. Are we watching the old world order, the one built around the United Nations after World War II, slowly get replaced by something new? Something more centralized? The Peace Council or the United Nations? And if that's what's happening, what on earth does that mean for the future of international law, alliances, and, pretty much everything?